probably know who you are, but always worth updating people on the latest. Yat, you want to start?
Yeah, my name is Yat, Chairman, co-founder, Animoca brands. I guess for the context of this conversation, we have over 540 portfolio companies, 160 of them are in Web3 gaming. We're big believers in the space, and I guess we cut our teeth early with projects like Sandbox, but also Axie Infinity, OpenSea, and of course the whole Borget community. And we'll talk later about sort of how we feel the space is going to develop.
I'm Sébastien Borget, I'm the COO and co-founder at the Sandbox. We are a decentralized virtual world, we are part of the Animoca brands group. We brought in more than 400 major brands and we enable people to make their own 3D content and games without any code and publish them on the virtual land where they can own and monetize everything thanks to blockchain. I'm also the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, now an association that counts over 600 members with a main mission to educate and showcase what are the possibilities of blockchain technology in gaming.
Just two lines. I'm Herman, I'm the CEO of Probable, and I also run and work in a crypto gaming company as well. We're working on the Somnia blockchain as well as M Square, which works with people like Borget and beyond. So maybe, I think, a question to open that I'm sure many people are thinking is like, Web3 gaming seems to be always on the way and never really arrive. And I think it might be good first to dispel some myths about the actual usage. Yeah, you're probably very well placed to give us an overview of like
an overview. I mean, in 2022, the number of people playing Web3 games on a daily basis was about 1 million daily active users, which was, small but emerging. And today it's actually closer to 7. I think at the end of the year we're like 6.6 million daily active users in Web3 gaming, so it's been growing. So I think that's the usage of it has been increasing. In fact, much more so than what you would say with traditional AI agents, which by the way we're bullish on as well.
And geographically?
Geographically, actually we see a lot more activity in Asia. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the way that game publishers in Asia versus game publishers in the West have been looking at it. So if you look at, for instance, because of the fact that the SEC was so hostile before, right? Every American game publisher would basically stay away from tokens of any kind, right? And even NFTs, because they actually even go after projects that had NFTs in them, right? Whereas in Asia, we didn't have that problem. So major game publishers, whether it's like a NA10 or Netmarble, Nexon, Square Enix, Sega, they're all talking or actually doing things in Web3. Square Enix is a good example as well. They're not necessarily successful at it just per se, although I think WebZen actually had a very successful Web3 game at one point. But they were just sort of at the early stages of it, developing it, but they're talking about it and it's growing. So that's kind of one thing, Web3 gaming is growing. And I want to touch on one thing before passing it on to Seb, which is that there is a general, and this is very much because it's tokens, there's a general conflation between utility and usage and token prices, right?
Completely.
Yeah, right. And so I think the way to think of token prices is that they're market pricing indicators, almost kind of like a stock market, meaning that they give you the sentiment of an investor. They don't give you the sentiment of the game or the utility of the game itself. Right. So Axie Infinity, when you talk to an investor, Axie Infinity is dead and nobody's talking about it and all kind of stuff. But actually, from a gamer perspective, it has a stable base of 300,000-400,000 daily active players. It's emerging. The Ronin blockchain that basically houses essentially initially the Axie community, then brought in Pixels and other Apron and so on. Actually has a very vibrant gaming economy that's probably about anywhere from 1 million actives or more that actually grow. And they're within that ecosystem in a much more open, decentralized way. And then the other one would be Ton as well, right? The Ton ecosystem. So these are all growing. Right? But then when you talk to an investor, because they don't play the game, they don't feel the same way about this. And that's more of a macro, right? So for instance, AI agents had really a great run in 24. But the number of people using AI agents on Web3 versus gaming pales in comparison. There's more people playing games. But what was a big narrative in Web2? OpenAI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, AI, all that kind of stuff. So the macro investor sentiment on AI tokens, AI was good, therefore AI tokens did well. And so really, I think if you talk about token prices, it's about the market sentiment more so than the actual utility.
To reinforce what Yat was saying, I'm thinking about two actual trends we're seeing. One is like the overall like gaming ecosystem, particularly with blockchain, is more fragmented than ever. Like 5 years ago, we used to have like one chain, so everyone was working on that one chain, Ethereum, and all the gaming was happening. But today, there's, like you say, like 7 million DAUs, 100 million of active monthly playing blockchain game across so many different ecosystems that don't communicate across. Take Telegram, Tom network, and all those games, people playing like casual, hyper-casual games. And then you have Avalanche, Polygon, Immutable, and other chains, Sui as well, SI, and so on. So, and those ecosystems don't communicate somewhere. The second thing is like, it's not just about the big numbers. We've shown that network effect enables games to grow fast and gain tens of millions of users in a matter of days or weeks. But we're also seeing a shift into like how the industry is maturing thanks to the seamless technology. And games companies looking at more high-quality users, typically pixels or Sandbox. What we measure now is not just the number of unique users, but more like the returns on reward spend and how people who receive a token in form of reward are actually reinvesting that token to participate into the game economy, meaning they are more engaged, they are playing longer, and they create value, not just extract value from those games.
No, these are really good points. I mean, I think it'd be interesting just to underscore for everyone here, when people think of crypto gaming and you're kind of visualizing the experiences, I think for a lot of people they're quite basic, they lack, we don't think of AAA titles, in conventional gaming when we think of that. And I think that's something of a misconception. So maybe it'd be interesting to hear from each of you, like, what have you seen, especially lately, that you would find exciting to tell even a non-crypto native fan why they would want to play, why they would want to engage? And you can't talk about your own products as much as you
no, so, well, we have, I guess I'm going to cheat because we'll talk about some portfolios because I'm exposed in this space. But I mean, I think that perhaps the most recent example would be something like Godzilla, right, with Off the Grid. Basically the ex-Far Cry team, people know how to build a first-person shooter. What's interesting is that a lot of people who play the game don't actually necessarily know.
You want to give just 2 seconds about what the game is?
Oh yeah, so it's a first-person shooter. Think of it basically as a kind of PUBG. The quality is effectively just as good as PUBG. It would be probably the closest example of your classic AAA game. And I'll get to some thoughts around gaming, broadly speaking. But generally speaking, it's a game, the quality is very, very high. You just go basically search Off the Grid. It was actually one of the top charting games in sort of the pre-play, nothing to do with tokens, on the Epic Store, I think, and also on console, basically Xbox and PlayStation. And it was a good demonstration. Most of the people that were on board didn't even realize that they were playing a Web3 game. That has pros and cons. Right? So the pro, of course, is that a person plays a game and is on board and uses a wallet. And whether they trade or not, it's kind of, they're playing the game for the sake of the game, which is, by the way, what most sort of Web2 to Web3 game companies want to do, right? They want to focus on the game and they'll bring that engagement. That's good. But then I guess the transition is that once you're in Web3 and you have a wallet, what do you do? And if you're able to get them, and this is where the literacy comes into play, when you get them able to do something in Web3, those network effects really start to explode. And I think you see this much more in Sandbox. I'll let Seb go into that more. Whereas in, like for instance, when you guys were running basically the other side, it's a great example of actually the community of other side pales in terms of numbers for like Fortnite. Right?
Totally.
But when you think about the number of NFTs and tokens,
they had like $2 billion of connected wallets in one event.
Exactly.
Like 5,000 people. Exactly. That's crazy.
So the value is incredible. The revenue you generate from these activations and so on. I mean, Other Deed is still, I think, the biggest mint in history, right? So these are things that people forget because they want to focus on sort of the mass numbers. But one thing to understand, again, in the traditional gaming space, our conversion rate is on average 1.5%. So that means 10 million users, basically, really, when it comes down to it, actually doesn't represent, it represents hundreds of thousands of paying users. And they pay on average something like $80, okay? In Web3, every person is a paid user because they have to own an NFT or they activate typically in a native game, and they spend thousands of dollars. So the ARPU is completely different, so you can't compare it on those same measures. But yeah, we've come a long way. And of course you have hyper casual. And I would say one other thing. Look at the top 2 games in the world today, Roblox and Minecraft. Right? What are the graphics like?
There we go.
It's not about that. It's about user-generated content. It's actually about composable.
We'll come a bit to Roblox in a second, I'm curious. So, what have you seen that's not Sandbox that really inspires you lately? You can talk a bit about Sandbox as well, but what is the thing that makes you think, okay, even if I was 13 years old again into games, I'd be interested in this title for the sake of the title rather than just crypto?
Well, to be honest, I don't have so much time to play besides Sandbox these days, although I'm very supportive. I'm pretty interested in what Nexon and MapleStory is doing in the space. I think like they are leveraging ownership in a very interesting way, while they have like this multiplayer game that's been played already by hundreds of millions of Korean users, and that integrates ownership and incentive in the right way. Like you don't have to trade wholly the economy, ownership of certain assets that you earn progressively as you create content as well is rewarding you in the right way, and they seem to be on the right path. So I hope that it will be a game changer. There's also a few Korean companies, like they only introduced the blockchain once you started to reach level 40. So I forgot that game. That was like an incredible mobile game. You have like 500 gamers at the same time with a huge fight scene in like medieval.
Oh god, I can't remember myself, but
I think it's the one from Webzen.
Yes.
Yes.
And like massive success, huge revenue in more traditional Web 2, and Web 3 is only introduced once you reach level 40, which demonstrated you have like so much engagement and probably equipment and content in the game, where like the benefit of the ownership really makes sense for this kind of users. So what I love is like there's not one way anyway to succeed in Web3. I don't even know if there's like a success model through copycats in a way in blockchain gaming, but there's still a lot of people who are experimenting to like how we can like introduce the technology in a seamless manner to our audience in a way that really matters to them, and not put it on the top as the cherry on the cake, but you feel like if you remove it, the cake is still there.
And can I just add, I think one of the differences between East and West is that in Asia, they looked at blockchain as a business innovation to really help them sort of create new streams of revenue and sort of maybe grow engagement as well. Whereas I think in the West, they really looked at it more as a sort of a simple function. When we talk about NFTs inside games, they only think of the trading function, and they don't really extend deeper from the business model. But I think there's some parallels, right? Free-to-play gaming, even though it wasn't necessarily invented in the East, it actually was adopted in the East. It became big there. And then actually the West adopted it because it was the better business model. And I think that's actually where that adoption path will come as well.
So these are really good points. I think they cost the comparison with the real games industry. I mean, I can see from you guys the paint comparison of metrics, the paint comparison of when are we going to have those moments? I guess the question starts to arise, what are those entirely native ideas that are important commercially, are important to people culturally, that you think will emerge once we have greater adoption of the kind of permissionless composition, better UX, like when we have a thriving, Pokemon Go or Steam moment in this space, what do you think will be some of the peculiarities that we need to think about as investors, as builders?
Well, I mean, the very first thing, when something happens on chain and when network effects are being built on top, there's this wonderful thing where people compose all sorts of weird shit that you never expected. And you have to be comfortable with that. And I think this is the whole point about when you're a centralized platform, are you comfortable with people doing weird shit? Very simple example. If you're going to start building a game on chain, you expect all sorts of side bets. People are going to start doing betting platforms that you did not approve.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's something you have no control over, right?
Exactly.
It's what?
Yeah, I mean, and
no way to restrict.
Exactly. So there was an interesting thing. One of our protocols built this product called AnyChess. It's basically on-chain chess. I was actually at an opening match against Magnus Carlsen. So for those of you who know, Magnus Carlsen was a world number one grandmaster since I think he was 11 years old, whatever. So the bet wasn't would I win, because that was an impossible bet. It was just would I last longer than Bill Gates, which was 12 seconds. And what people ended up doing is they started creating side bets. And they created protocols that we had no control over and putting these bets around. And it was small, it was like hundreds of dollars, it wasn't like something big. But the point is that people are now able to do that. And so I expect these innovations to happen. The second thing is, and I think this is where it really blows up, anything that Web3 touches becomes a financial instrument. And I think this is the thing where a traditional gamer feels uncomfortable about it. But it doesn't mean you have to partake in it. But as a business, you can now start drawing revenue from it, whether it's from trading, whether it's from liquidity, and there's a market that develops. And I think the market point also gives you points of interest as to where you go. The market pricing tells you, oh, this item is hot, or this item is interesting, or maybe this event is interesting. You're guided by market prices in the way that market prices guide us today in terms of resourcing. And tokens do the same thing. And I think this is the part where people are also uncomfortable, because if you're a traditional game designer, which is why I go to things like Roblox or Minecraft or Sandbox, because they're UGC, you're kind of okay with the community to take you into those areas. Whereas traditional game developers like to control you. They like to say, this is the story, this is the vision, and this is the direction. And you're supposed to enjoy it in this way.
And it's a deeply cultural thing.
And it's a very cultural thing. And you can see this also in the way that app stores are designed. Apple really struggled with the open market, which eventually they removed. But what's interesting is that the heyday of Apple's discovery, when you launched an app on the App Store to be discovered, it had a market. It had free rankings, it had gross rankings. What was gross rankings? How many people spend on the game. What is that? It's a market. It tells you what people actually like because they're spending money. It's capitalism at work, right? Apple didn't like it because they wanted to kingmake. They wanted to say, this is the content you should be using so I can sell more phones. Or, some AR feature, which is nice, but most people don't care. But they would push those things and they would feature, they would try to kingmake. And now nobody goes to the App Store to be discovered.
100%.
Right? Because there's no more market. So what blockchain really does, it makes a market out of everything, and it creates true discovery, and in this sense, actually the real freedom in the market.
Yeah, for me, like the next big thing I'm looking at is like how we allow people to be more creative in a sense. Like we've seen in gaming, like the most and the largest gaming success came out of like creators modding their favorite game to churn them out into now like some of the largest esports played game from Counter-Strike and so on. And with the blockchain technology, you can not only enable a creator economy and many other possibilities around like the core asset or the core engine of a game, but you can also like drive further adoption, engagement, and that's what we're really looking at Sandbox in general. And that openness in the creativity can come in the form of like the creative tool, no code, and so on. But now it's been accelerated with use of AI as well and generative content, and even like intelligent or sentient NPCs and vibe coding. So that's kind of like the new exciting trend, which today looks like, oh, those are like a gimmicky game that look like early Flash game or early iPhone game, but we know where the story is going. They will get better, they will open up like to new audiences, they will open up to new market segments and new monetization possibilities, and that's, in my opinion, the interesting moment we're going to see again for driving more interest.
No, this makes total sense. I think it's a set of perspectives you don't often hear about where the space will go. I want to touch on something a little bit different just in the time we've got, which is jobs. I want to touch on the idea of jobs in games, because both of you have portfolios of products where people earn an income. Often this can be seen in a really dirty way, right? There's some stigma not within our community but outside of it. However, in a world where increasingly, ChatGPT is taking all of our jobs, are we going to be in a world where people seek more meaning, seek more income, seek more human interaction in these spaces? And is crypto gaming uniquely set up to support that type of activity? People already earn an income in Roblox and so forth, so it'd be good to hear that. Maybe start with Sam this time.
So what we are seeing is like right now AI is not as creative as we think. Like we see really nice demos of like how AI has been generating levels, words, or 3D assets, but those assets are not usable in a practical way. They are too heavy. The worlds that they generate are pretty boring after the 10-second nice-looking video. When you start to enter it as a player, you don't create a compelling progression, a compelling stories that engage players for minutes to hours. So at that moment,
you think that'll be a problem? That'll be a problem for some time.
It might improve. Every 6 months we see a new model. Things are moving fast, but it's still a tool and it's still a technology that requires humans and game designers, level designers a long time. However, there's an area where AI has so far been able to replace, unfortunately, a lot of artists is like 2D art. Like specifically for generating video, for marketing and user acquisition, or 2D asset for live ops in mobile free-to-play games, generating update. That means like this is a technology like we have, all the creative people have to follow closely and start to learn how to use and keep on the page. If not, they will be very rapidly outpaced.
Maybe just quickly pulling on the AI thread first. From a tool standpoint, really what you think about is that it will change the nature of jobs for game creation. Like vibe coding is a good example of that, where you basically prompt an engine to basically give you code. And yeah, sure, the game isn't, you're not going to build Call of Duty. but it will build you something pretty basic first.
And people have shipped things now
exactly.
already.
People ship
Purely
using
by
coding.
We see shit can fun and can drive millions of users.
But I mean, I don't know how many of you here remember Flappy Bird.
There we go. Yeah, but that was still something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And so talk about from a job standpoint, right? We don't have to think about it also in the measure of, hey, it's $1 billion business. I mean, that's the same thing about token prices, right? Like this, it's if you're a 5-man team and you're building a $1 million revenue business or even hundreds of thousands, that's actually not bad, right? So it kind of depends really what your goals are. And we see this also happening, for instance, with the more primitive versions of, say, Roblox. How many studios have emerged from building inside Roblox first?
It's nuts. There's agencies that only do that now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they grew a certain size. And then they said, you know what, I have an audience, and I'm going to build a different game, right? So we can't just think of it simply from the perspective of sort of one tool set or the other. It frees people up to do more things. And mass amortizes the ability to make games, and so the skill set expands and enhances. But there's another area in terms of where revenue comes in, which is advertising. So advertising revenue is almost half of the expense, actually is half of the expense, including platform fees, of our industry. So basically, if you're a traditional Web2 game, and like for instance Monopoly Go, like $2 billion franchise, big game, okay, Monopoly, right? Spends approximately 30% obviously on platform fees, and another 30% on advertising.
It's nuts.
Right? And what value do they get? So this is over $1 billion. That doesn't cover that payroll costs, nothing, right? So at the end, they have a respectable 10-15% margin, but Apple and Facebook just basically made more money than the company that actually was doing it, right? That's the worst form of rent seeking ever.
And all that money actually goes to just the platform where
Right.
we've been collecting the data. So instead of spreading out to the user who own that data.
And the irony is that it's about acquiring the very user that actually is supposed to play the game. And how much value does a user receive? Zero. How much value does a game company receive? Actually, got a user, but frankly, it's all lost. And how much money does Apple or Google or Facebook actually reinvest in the gaming industry? Zero. Okay? Exactly. So basically,
when they even acknowledge it as being valuable,
exactly.
right? But
So it's mass extraction in the space. And this is one of the key innovations in blockchain, which is airdrops. So airdrops is the inverse of marketing. Sure, there's inefficiencies. We had click fraud, in the early days of the internet as well. People are farming, all these issues, okay? So we know there's a challenge. But the principle is, I'm giving value to the user directly instead of the platform. How much of that value go back into the game? Sure, I can cash out. There's a possibility to lose and you sell the token. But if you have a good game, they'll say, hey, I use my credits, try out the game. I mean, it's kind of what they do with, when they give out basically handouts during COVID. What did they do? They ended up buying more milk, or more products, or more games, or watch movies to stimulate the economy. That's actually what an airdrop does. And over the last 4 years, we've had over $42 billion of airdrops. Right? Now, I mean, this seems like a large number, but then when you consider that, we spend $100 billion in advertising basically every year, basically it's nothing, right? It just kind of demonstrates where it's going to go. And so from an employment standpoint, this is where it's at. If you're a gamer who adds value, you build network effects in the game, and you can do this full time. Kind of like if you're an Instagrammer and you have 10 million followers. Actually, you're valuable, right? How much does Instagram pay you? Zero. You have to go to third-party advertisers to do it. But actually, you're building the network. So it's the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. Games are built off the back of unpaid labor. In the case of Roblox, child labor that supports undeniably that supports billions of dollars of value. And I think it is interesting. It seems to me somehow that a lot of the failure of imagination in the wider network around our space is kind of a failure of vocabulary, right? Words like play to earn or betting or even airdrop, they don't really capture what you're describing, which is to take the economic engine of game production and discovery and provide real ownership of that engine to others. I mean, Sandbox does this, for example.
Well, when you think about all of those strategies, they are mostly like cost of acquisition in a sense. So you think you're giving something, but you're actually saving on something else. And you not spending that money to advertising network is already a great thing to start pushing that shift. Then Sandbox, things we've done is really we've been able to reward the participation of creators through a game jam, through contests, through acquiring land and publishing their content, through their playtime and engagement with an avatar and exploring different content and collection, and do that through brands. That's been one of our pillar strategy, whether we involve Jurassic World, AT&T, Deepak Chopra, Attack on Titan, Walking Dead, Ubisoft, you name it, from all those different verticals. I think brands see a lot of value into that as well, and they are very receptive to the idea of like first creating loyalty and engagement, and second shifting their spending from like advertising toward like new models.
This is really solid. I mean, I think coming to the end, it sounds like there's a ton we could keep talking about. I would like close by saying it sounds like both of you are highlighting a larger problem, which is this attention crisis, right? This issue in where ad dollars are going, and I think gaming is maybe at the forefront of innovative ways of leveraging Web3 to solve those problems. So I know what my next startup will be investing in after this. I'm going to go do that now, so yeah.
There's no better platform to capture over like 30 minutes to 1 hour of user attention than gaming at the moment.
Nothing
So
like that.
that's why it matters.
Real pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.